The day his family proudly introduced the woman they wanted him to marry, they had no idea his girlfriend was sitting quietly in a mansion she legally owned. They laughed at her silence. They mistook her kindness for weakness. But before the night was over, a single truth would destroy every assumption they had built their lives on. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from: USA, Canada, England, Lagos. We'd love to hear from you. That's because every comment means a lot to us. No matter where you are turning from, we love you. And if you are new here, this is Family Roots Stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. There are moments in life when people reveal exactly who they are, not through grand speeches or dramatic actions, but through what they assume belongs to them. They assume loyalty without earning it. They assume respect without giving it. And sometimes they assume ownership over things they never possessed in the first place. For years, the Harrison family believed they knew everything about their son's relationship. They believed they understood the woman standing beside him. They believed wealth had a certain appearance, power had a certain voice, and important people announced themselves the moment they entered a room. They were wrong on every count, because true strength often arrives quietly. It sits at the table without demanding attention. It listens more than it speaks. And when the truth finally emerges, it doesn't need to shout. It simply exists, waiting for everyone else to catch up. On a cool Saturday evening in Connecticut, the Harrison family estate glowed under rows of hanging lights as luxury cars lined the circular driveway. The family had gathered to celebrate what Eleanor Harrison called a new chapter for her son, Ethan Harrison. Guests had traveled from several states. Distant relatives laughed in clusters across the lawn, while servers moved carefully through the crowd carrying trays of wine and appetizers. The atmosphere looked warm from the outside, but beneath the polished smiles rested years of quiet resentment. At the center of it all sat Claire Bennett, Ethan's girlfriend of 6 years. She wore a simple navy dress and carried herself with a kind of calm confidence that often made people uncomfortable. There was nothing flashy about Claire. No designer logos. No expensive jewelry displayed for attention. Yet somehow, she always seemed like the one person in every room who had nothing to prove. Eleanor Harrison had never liked Claire. She didn't dislike her because Claire had been rude or disrespectful. In fact, that was part of the problem. Claire had always been graceful, thoughtful, and impossible to provoke. Eleanor believed a woman should fight for her place in a family, seek approval, and work to fit into existing traditions. Claire never did any of those things. She treated everyone with kindness, but never begged to be accepted. Over time, Eleanor began interpreting that quiet independence as arrogance. To her, Claire seemed distant, almost impossible to control. And people who cannot be controlled often become targets for those who mistake influence for authority. For years, Eleanor hinted that Ethan deserved someone more traditional, more social, and more willing to make family the center of her life. Ethan rarely argued. He simply remained silent, and silence has a way of becoming agreement when left unchecked. The truth was that Ethan Harrison had once admired Claire for the very qualities his family now criticized. They met nearly 7 years earlier at a charity fundraiser in Boston. Ethan had been ambitious, charming, and eager to build a career in commercial real estate. Claire had recently returned from graduate school and quietly managed several business interests left to her by her late father. During those early years, Ethan loved Claire's intelligence. He admired how effortlessly she handled challenges that left others overwhelmed. But admiration can become insecurity when one person begins to compare instead of appreciate. As Ethan's career progressed more slowly than he expected, he started noticing the differences between them. Claire never discussed money. She never boasted about investments or properties. Yet doors seemed to open for her without effort. Opportunities appeared around her. Problems disappeared before becoming crises. Ethan began asking himself questions he never voiced aloud. Questions about why his life felt stalled while hers moved forward with such ease. What Ethan never fully understood was that Claire had inherited more than wealth from her father. She had inherited discipline. Her father, Richard Bennett, built his business empire quietly over decades and taught his daughter one lesson above all others. Never allow possessions to become your identity. Ownership, he often said, is most secure when it doesn't need an audience. By the time Claire turned 35, she had expanded her family's investments into several industries, including commercial properties, logistics firms, and technology partnerships. Yet almost no one outside a small circle knew the full extent of her holdings. Public records existed for anyone willing to look. The information wasn't hidden. People simply assumed wealth always introduced itself loudly. Claire never corrected those assumptions, because she saw no reason to explain herself. Those who valued her would do so without knowing her balance sheet. Those who didn't were never truly interested in her to begin with. As evening settled over the estate, guests gradually moved toward the mansion for dinner. Ethan stood near the entrance greeting relatives while Eleanor wore the expression of a woman preparing for a performance she had rehearsed in her mind many times. Claire noticed it immediately. Over the years, she had learned to recognize the signs. The overly pleasant smile. The forced excitement. The glances exchanged between family members who believed they shared a secret. Claire had seen those expressions before. She simply hadn't expected them tonight. When Eleanor walked toward the driveway with unusual enthusiasm, several relatives followed close behind. Moments later, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside the mansion. The driver's door opened first. Then the passenger door followed. A young woman stepped out, smiling nervously as Eleanor hurried forward to embrace her like family. Claire watched quietly from the terrace as conversations around her softened into whispers. The young woman introduced herself as Lily Carter. She was elegant, charming, and clearly unaware of the tension surrounding her arrival. Eleanor guided Lily toward Ethan with unmistakable pride in her eyes. The guests exchanged curious glances while Ethan's expression shifted in ways only someone who knew him deeply could notice. Surprise, unease, guilt. Claire noticed every one of them. She had spent 6 years learning the language of Ethan's silence. What she didn't know yet was whether this evening would reveal a misunderstanding or confirm something far more painful. As Lily approached, Eleanor's voice carried across the gathering with deliberate clarity. She called Lily a wonderful young woman, someone who truly appreciated family values and understood what made a strong partnership. Several relatives smiled knowingly. Others looked away. And through it all, Claire remained seated, calm and unreadable. People often mistake composure for ignorance. They assume silence means someone doesn't understand what's happening around them. But Claire had learned long ago that people reveal more when they believe no one is paying attention. She noticed the brief look Ethan gave Lily. She noticed how naturally Eleanor placed herself between Claire and the rest of the family. She noticed relatives avoiding eye contact. Every detail fit together like pieces of a puzzle she had hoped never to complete. Yet even then, she refused to react emotionally. Her father once told her that important truths deserve patience because emotions can blur what facts reveal clearly. So she watched. She listened. And while everyone else focused on appearances, Claire began gathering answers. The evening had only just begun, and already, the foundation beneath several lives was beginning to crack. As guests entered the grand dining room, no one realized that the walls surrounding them carried a history none of them understood. The mansion they admired had been acquired years earlier through a family trust established by Richard Bennett. Every renovation, every landscaped garden, every marble hallway existed because of decisions Claire had quietly made after inheriting the estate. Ethan knew they lived comfortably. He believed they shared assets as many long-term couples do. What he never asked was who actually owned them. He assumed. His family assumed. And assumptions have a way of surviving for years until a single document, a single signature, or a single truth brings them to an end. That night, as crystal glasses reflected the soft glow of chandeliers overhead, the Harrison family believed they were preparing to reshape Ethan's future. They had no idea they were walking toward a revelation that would force each of them to confront something far more uncomfortable than financial loss. They were about to discover the price of arrogance. And before the evening ended, one question would leave the entire room speechless. How do you replace someone when everything you stand on belongs to them? Claire Bennett had learned something important during her years around the Harrison family. People rarely hide their intentions forever. Given enough time, most people eventually reveal exactly what they want. Some reveal it through words. Others reveal it through silence. Eleanor Harrison preferred both. For years, she had disguised her disapproval as concern. She questioned Claire's priorities. She suggested that Ethan needed a woman who was more involved in family traditions. She often mentioned daughters of family friends during holiday dinners, carefully planting names into conversations as though they appeared there by accident. Claire recognized the pattern early. She simply chose not to participate in it. What puzzled Claire most was Ethan's unwillingness to confront his mother. In the beginning, she had assumed he was trying to preserve peace. Families are complicated, after all. Compromise often feels easier than confrontation. But as the years passed, Ethan's silence became more troubling. Whenever Eleanor criticized Claire, Ethan changed the subject. Whenever relatives made passive remarks, Ethan laughed awkwardly and moved on. He never openly agreed with them, but he rarely defended Claire either. It was a small betrayal repeated so many times that eventually it stopped feeling small. 6 years earlier, that would have devastated Claire. Back then, she still believed love naturally inspired courage. She believed people protected those they valued. Over time, experience taught her something different. Love may inspire courage, but character determines whether that courage ever appears. Ethan loved Claire in many ways. Claire never doubted that. But loving someone and standing beside them are not always the same thing. As guests settled around the enormous dining table that evening, Claire noticed that Eleanor had arranged the seating herself. That alone was unusual. Eleanor normally delegated such details to staff. Tonight, however, she had taken personal control. Claire found herself seated near the far end of the table, while Lily Carter occupied the seat directly beside Ethan. No explanation was offered. None was necessary. The message was obvious. Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances as Claire calmly unfolded her napkin and thanked a server who poured her wine. Her composure unsettled them. They expected visible hurt. They expected jealousy, anger, perhaps even tears. Instead, Claire appeared entirely at ease. Across the table, Ethan avoided looking directly at her. That troubled Claire more than the seating arrangement itself. Because guilt has a distinct appearance. And Ethan looked guilty. Dinner began with polite conversation. Discussions drifted from business to travel, then to family updates. Claire contributed when asked and listened when she wasn't. Meanwhile, Eleanor devoted extraordinary attention to Lily. She praised Lily's volunteer work, complimented her manners, and repeatedly emphasized how much Lily valued family. Family should always come first, Eleanor announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Claire simply took a sip of water. Lily smiled politely, unaware she had become part of something much larger than herself. What Claire found interesting was that Lily genuinely seemed kind. There was nothing calculating about her behavior. She appeared nervous, eager to make a good impression, and surprisingly sincere. That observation complicated matters. If Ethan had misrepresented his relationship, Lily might be far less responsible than everyone assumed. Claire made a mental note. Always gather facts before drawing conclusions. It was advice her father repeated throughout her childhood. Richard Bennett built his empire by understanding people. He often told Claire that assumptions are expensive. Facts, on the other hand, are profitable. Claire suspected that lesson would soon prove valuable. Halfway through dinner, Eleanor stood and gently tapped her wine glass. The room grew quiet. Claire immediately recognized what was happening. Important announcements rarely begin with confidence. They begin with ceremony. Eleanor smiled broadly. "I just want to say how happy I am to see so many people together tonight," she began. "Family matters more than anything. And as we grow older, we realize how important it is for our loved ones to find true happiness." Claire noticed Ethan tense immediately. Interesting. Very interesting. Eleanor continued. For years, I've prayed that Ethan would find someone who truly understands him. Someone who shares our family's values and vision for the future. Silence settled across the room. Several relatives stared down at their plates. Others looked directly at Claire. Lily's smile slowly faded. Even she sensed something was wrong. Then Eleanor placed her hand warmly over Lily's. And tonight, I want everyone to officially welcome Lily. She has brought tremendous joy into Ethan's life, and I believe she represents a beautiful new beginning. The silence that followed seemed endless. No one moved. No one spoke. Claire slowly placed her fork on her plate. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Eleanor clearly expected an emotional reaction. She received none. Instead, Claire looked toward Lily. For the first time that evening, she spoke directly to her. Lily, how long have you known Ethan? The question caught everyone off guard. Lily hesitated. Almost 8 months, she answered softly. Claire nodded. 8 months. I see. Still calm. Still composed. Lily, may I ask you something else? Lily glanced uncertainly toward Ethan. He remained silent. That silence told Claire almost everything she needed to know. Of course, Lily said. What did Ethan tell you about our relationship? The question landed heavily. Lily looked visibly uncomfortable. He said. She began cautiously. He said the relationship was effectively over. That you two were staying together temporarily because separating would be complicated financially. Claire remained expressionless. Several relatives gasped quietly. Ethan closed his eyes. Claire turned slowly toward him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Claire looked back at Lily. Thank you for answering honestly. Lily looked confused. You aren't angry? She asked quietly. Claire offered a small, almost sympathetic smile. No, I appreciate honesty. Then she returned to her meal. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversation never fully recovered. Because everyone at that table now understood 2 things. First, Ethan had been dishonest. Second, Claire knew far more than anyone realized. For the remainder of dinner, Eleanor made repeated attempts to revive the celebratory mood, but the energy had disappeared. Relatives left the table earlier than usual. Conversations became fragmented. Even Lily appeared increasingly distressed. Claire remained until dessert. Then she quietly excused herself. As she walked through the marble hallway toward the library, she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan. Of course. Claire, he called softly. She stopped but did not turn immediately. When she finally faced him, Ethan looked exhausted. We need to talk. Claire studied him carefully. We've needed to talk for quite some time, Ethan. He lowered his eyes. It's complicated. Claire almost smiled. People often describe situations as complicated when the truth is actually simple but uncomfortable. What exactly is complicated? Claire asked calmly. Ethan struggled to answer. Because there was no acceptable explanation. Only choices. And consequences. For the first time in years, Ethan appeared genuinely afraid. Not afraid of losing money. Not afraid of disappointing his family. Afraid of losing Claire. The realization had arrived much later than it should have. And Claire wasn't certain it had arrived soon enough. Because while Ethan had spent years allowing others to define his future, Claire had quietly been building one of her own. A future that, as Ethan would soon discover, did not depend on him at all. And before the week was over, a single legal document would reveal just how little he truly understood about the woman he claimed to know.